Hello and welcome to OSRA. Um, Here we have Christian and myself, Nick, two of the members of the OSRA team. And tonight we're going to give you a hopefully short overview of what the OSRA application is and how we work on it. This is our page on Agile Ventures. You can come here to find more information about the project, to join Agile Ventures itself and join the OSRA project, and that way you get access to our Slack channel and you can keep up to date on all of our discussions and get involved in our scrums, and we very much encourage you to take advantage of this and join the team and see if you like it and see if you would like to contribute. So we will start with just a quick walk through the OSRA application as it currently exists. Just to give you a bit of a background on what the project is overall. OSRA stands for Orphan Sponsorship and Relief Association. It's an organization, non-profit organization that's registered in the UK, but it operates primarily in the Middle East. And its aim is to sponsor orphans in Syria. And the way it does it is it gets information about orphans from Syria, it recruits sponsors, and then links those sponsors with orphans. And through donations from the sponsors, the orphans receive better care, better education, and so forth. So here's what the OSRA organization sees when they use our application on a daily basis. They arrive here after logging in, and the application is essentially it's primarily a database, and its main goal is to store the information that the OSRA Association uses. So first of all, here we have, now of course these are all fake data that we've populated the application with for testing. This is our testing server. But the interface overall is identical, of course. So first of all, OSRA keeps track of its partners. These are the organizations in Syria that are on the ground in Syria, collecting information about the orphans and then forwarding that information onto OSRA. Each partner gets a separate record, and when that partner sends a spreadsheet with information about a new batch of orphans, the OSRA team can follow this upload process to import these orphans into the system to validate that all the required information is in place, and so forth. And from that point on, these orphans become available in the system, and they're now available for sponsorship. There is also a list of sponsors, and again, this is all fake data, of course, but again, you get the picture. So when a sponsor is requesting to sponsor some orphans, you can see that there are numbers here for how many orphans a sponsor has requested and how many he's currently sponsoring. When the OSRA team is ready to create a sponsorship, they click on this link to orphan button and go through the process that establishes that sponsorship in the system. And this is, again, how they keep track of ongoing sponsorships. And by and large, this is the extent of the user interface as it exists at the moment. Christian, am I forgetting anything?
No, let's do a sponsorship.
Let's do a sponsorship. All right. So here we have a sponsor. When we click the link to orphan button, this is the view that we're taken to, which is essentially the orphan index view, just a list of orphans, except for these orphans are pre-selected for those that are eligible for a sponsorship. So those that are not currently sponsored. And up top here, we display the sponsor, and if the sponsor has any particular preference about what orphans he or she wishes to sponsor, that information will be displayed here. This view is quite wide, but this is the client, the OSRA organization, really needs to have all this data available to them at the time of sponsorship creation. So that's a constraint that we have to deal with. And so once they find a suitable orphan for this particular sponsor, they can enter a start date for this sponsorship. And once that's in place, they simply click this button, get a nice friendly message that the sponsorship link was successfully created. And now there is a list of orphans that are being currently sponsored by this sponsor. And once the sponsorship runs its course, we can end this sponsorship. And again, a friendly message, and you can see that now this orphan is previously sponsored. So we still keep track of all these sponsorships, even the ones that are expired, but they're just separated into two different categories. So that's the existing UI. And this is a list of things that we wanted to talk about in this video, so you'll see me referring to it quite often, I think. Plans for the future in terms of just functionality and additional features that the the OSRA organization will be using include creation of background tasks that will monitor the start and end dates of sponsorships. So for example, again, if we go back here, you can see that you can enter a future date here, but at the moment the application is not aware of that intelligently, so it simply records it. What we want to do is that if you enter a future date here, then the sponsorship remains active until that date and then gets automatically inactivated. Another thing that belongs in here as well is the orphans stop being eligible for sponsorships when they reach the age of 18. And again, we would like to create another background task that will iterate through the database, through the table of orphans. And once an orphan reaches 18 years of age, notify the OSRA team. And this notification will happen through some kind of a centralized notification center that we have just kind of sketched on a napkin at this point. We don't have a particularly strong idea for how this is going to happen, but essentially this facade to the application that I showed you earlier would be replaced with a notification center where such messages are displayed. And a very long-term goal at this point is to create, in addition to this website that exists right now, into which the OSRA organization and their employees have to log in. This is just for them to manage the data. What we would also like to create in a more distant future is a public-facing site that will be open to prospective sponsors and to existing sponsors. And through that, existing sponsors can get information, get updates about the orphans that they're sponsoring, can make payments towards these sponsorships, and of course, new sponsors can join as well. So this is what's on our to-do list and sort of gross features. These are the plans for the immediate and long future. Again, Christian, am I forgetting anything?
No, so far so good.
All right. So let's move on to a quick overview of our code base. So this is something that would be more interesting to you if you're a developer thinking of joining OSRA. So the entity relationship diagram that we're working with is something like this. This is slightly out of date, but essentially most of it is there. And you can see we have a number of models that are interconnected in all these different ways. We are definitely aware of the fact that the orphan model has become sort of our God model that keeps accumulating a whole bunch of additional responsibilities. And that's something that we're trying to keep in check and keep under control. Basically, the important bits about the code base is that OSRA is primarily a data management application, and as such, it is very important for us to be concerned about data integrity. to make sure that all data is valid, that it is correctly recorded, that all the states, state transitions, for example, from sponsored to unsponsored state, happen correctly, and all the attendant actions of these transitions happen every single time. So you can see, for example, if we look at our orphan model, which is the most complicated model that we have, it has a significant number of validations, including many custom validations that we have written to reflect the different states in which the orphan can exist. But yeah, there's a lot of overall focus on data preservation and data integrity. One other thing to mention about the OSRA code base is that for quite a long time, from the beginning of the application, we have relied on something called Active Admin. It's a gem that is, it's more than a gem, it's essentially a whole framework for data management. And in the beginning, it made our lives very easy, because what Active Admin does is it essentially generates basic controller actions and basic views. So all the CRUD actions for all models and all views, basic CRUD views for all models, were generated for us automatically with minimal configuration. And until recently, if you came into the app folder, which is of course the standard folder where the main application structure is kept in a Rails application, you would have found the controllers and the views folders empty. Because Active Admin was doing all that through its own files that are basically Ruby files, but they contain all the configuration that is necessary for both the views and the controllers. And you can see that they tend to run quite long, again, for a big model like the orphan model, because this is your view, all your views and all the controller actions kind of mashed into one file. So this was something that was quite convenient at the beginning, but we fairly quickly ran into certain inflexibilities of Active Admin when we were trying to do things that were more complicated than basic CRUD. And eventually we came to the pretty difficult decision to get rid of Active Admin and to rewrite the controllers and the views from scratch, just make them basic Rails entities. And so this is actually the main push for the team as we speak. We're transitioning from Active Admin to just standard Rails. This is something that a lot of work is going into right now. So the UI that you saw here, this is all generated by Active Admin. And of course, if you like shades of gray, then you are happy with that. But we thought that this was a good opportunity to also reimagine the UI. And we asked a web designer friend of ours to come up with something. And this is the wireframe that he created, which we all think is a huge improvement over what we have currently. So he envisions more of almost a single page application feel to it, where you have both the index view with a list of whatever records you're looking at, plus the show view here in a sidebar. Filters, if you happen to catch, there's this long panel of filters on the side. He envisions it as a collapsible kind of slide in, slide out thing that you don't see until you need it. So it's a definite improvement in terms of the UI, or at least our whole team thinks that. And this is what we're currently building, in addition to recreating all the controller actions and the view logic that we need to take out of Active Admin and put it into Rails. So I think that's the general overview of the code base complete. Again, Christian, everything okay so far?
Yeah, looks like okay.
All right. So let's progress to DevOps. In the sense of DevOps, where OSRA is fairly standard, I think, in what you see in other applications of this caliber and in other applications that you will find on Agile Ventures. So we operate 3 separate environments, testing, staging, and production. And there are separate branches from our main repo, and there are separate servers on Heroku. Testing is where we deploy things immediately after they're merged into, let's say, immediately after a new pull request is merged into our code base. And this is where the development team actually gets to play with these new features that we implement. If everything looks good there, we push that up to the staging server, and the staging server is where the client now gets to play with the feature, stress test it a bit, and then let us know if they accept it or not. And if they accept it, then of course we promote it all the way to the production server, so the feature is now live and available to the client in their day-to-day operation. All of our hosting is on Heroku right now. We haven't started to push any of the limits of RAM or database yet. We've briefly explored what might happen if we start doing that and discussed some alternatives, but for the time being, Heroku, just a free hobby tier, is sufficient to run everything, which is, of course, fantastic because it doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't cost the client anything. We do continuous integration via Semaphore. So every time we do a merge of a pull request, our Semaphore automatically runs our entire test suite, and if the suite is green, it deploys to the relevant server, testing, staging, or production. We use coveralls to keep an eye on code coverage, and we monitor the production application by New Relic, which is, even though our application is fairly small, New Relic has already come in quite handy in debugging 1 or 2 issues that we've had that were exhausting the memory on the production server, and we were able to trace that down to one particular functionality of our application and refactor it to eliminate that memory overflow. Let's move on to team workflow. And again, I think we're fairly standard in that when it comes to especially Agile Ventures applications. Our team is geographically distributed. Our size fluctuates from 3, which is what we're at currently, to we had 7 or 8 people actively working on the application just a few months ago. Sadly, we're losing people to paid employment. So they come here, they get good enough to earn a paycheck, and then their time commitments shift. So we do have a churn in terms of the team composition, but I think that's to be expected with any open source project. The team is and continues to be and has been geographically distributed from the very beginning. The very first developer to work on this application was based in Canada. We've had developers based throughout the EU, in the United States. We had somebody for a brief period of time from South Africa, so definitely we span the globe. We use Slack for communication, like all the other Agile Ventures teams. We have our own dedicated channel. Please feel free to check it out to see what kind of things we discuss on a regular basis. Unlike other Agile Ventures projects that primarily rely on Pivotal Tracker, we use Jira for our project management, and we simply happen to like some of the features that Jira offers vis-a-vis Pivotal Tracker, but yeah, both of them are fantastic services, and this is not a judgment of one versus the other. We also use Confluence which, if you're not familiar with it, is actually, it's where I am right now. So when we work on something jointly, like a plan for this screencast, this is where we store these shared documents. And the very nice thing about Confluence is that it's another Atlassian product, so it integrates very well with Jira, and we can actually create a Jira task from within Confluence. So this is something that we find quite useful in a client meeting, where we quickly take notes with feedback from the client and immediately turn that into a Jira issue that goes into our backlog. We work via GitHub, and we have a pretty robust system of pull requests and code review. We've had several developers who have gone to work on commercial applications come back and tell us how much they miss the pull request and code review process that we've implemented. We definitely try to maintain our standards when it comes to code, particularly when it comes to testing. We definitely don't want to let anything slide. And code review has been, I think, a very positive thing for everybody involved. And we encourage everybody from the most senior to the most junior members of the team to join in, because it's a very valuable learning process. And some very good discussions and some important decisions came out of code review conversations. Pair programming, the next point on my list, is something that we definitely believe in, but we're not dogmatic about it, and that is for practical reasons. We simply, all of us are pressed for time, and especially when the team size is as small as it is right now, with only 3 people actively working on the application, it's pretty difficult for us to schedule a time that is convenient for any 2 developers, let alone for all of us. So pair programming happens rarely, regrettably rarely, but we do know the value of this practice, and we try to do it whenever we can. Instead of pair programming, what we end up having are scrums that tend to turn into kind of more. We break from the scrum format, which is a short 15-minute meeting of everybody just quickly reporting on what they're working on, and these turn into more long-form discussions and problem-solving discussions, and even sometimes live coding sessions if necessary. So I think that compensates at least partially for the lack of pair programming. We communicate our client via Google+. We have a dedicated group there where we exchange messages. And we also, when we do have a client meeting, we do it through Google Hangouts, the same way that we're recording this video right now. And all of our client meetings are recorded and are publicly available as well. How are we doing, Christian?
Very good. Just want to add that all the information to join OSRA is on the Agile Ventures page.
Right.
On the projects, there's OSRA, and anything you need to join OSRA can be found there.
Yeah. So please, if you love, or if you like, or if you think it's okay what you're hearing and seeing right now, then have a look and join our team. And you can join our team here on Agile Ventures. And once you have access to Slack, to Agile Ventures Slack, then you'll see our channel there. Basically, reach out, say hello, and if you don't feel like going through any of the setup by yourself, then we'll be more than happy to walk you through the process. Okay, so just very quickly, we've kind of talked about the sort of general overview of OSRA and the code and how we work. Just a few things that we thought might be of interest, as there are maybe either unique to OSRA, or there are some of the things that we've kind of had to work on recently, and we think that these are interesting things to share. So very quickly, let's talk about that. So I already mentioned that our orphan model, first of all, what you see here is just a list of its attributes. So it stores a lot of information. And by virtue of that, and by virtue of the fact that it's such a central model, basically everything goes through orphan at one point or another. This model began to accumulate a lot of logic that was not directly related to orphan, but had to do with sponsorships or even sponsors. And sponsor, to some extent, was doing the same thing. So one of the things that we did fairly recently was we explored and then went ahead with this idea of extracting service objects to reduce this bloat in models. So just to give you an example of what this might entail, for example, before when we created a sponsorship, we had a after create lifecycle hook that fired, and this callback called to the sponsor and to the orphan that were involved in this sponsorship, and basically told them how to update themselves, how to change their statuses, how to change their active sponsorship accounts, etc. And so basically sponsorship was being responsible for too many things, and sponsor had to monitor its own state, or had to be aware of sponsorships being created and had to respond to that, and so did orphan. And so we solved, or at least mitigated, this problem by extracting these service objects. And these are very small. They are plain old Ruby objects, or poros, as you might see them referred to. They don't inherit from anything remotely approaching active record base. They're simply Ruby classes. And in general, they expose a single public method, which is call. And the way we use them is we pass in, so we basically say, in this case, we would say create sponsorship.new, pass in this case, the sponsorship record that is being created, and then simply say call. And this service object is then responsible. You can see that wrapped here in a transaction. It's responsible for persisting the sponsorship. It's responsible for updating and saving the orphan and doing the same to the sponsor. And in both cases, you can see that these methods, private methods that update and save orphan and sponsor, they call in turn on other service objects whose job it is essentially just to do this, to update the sponsor or to update the orphan. So this reduced the bloat in the sponsorship, sponsor, and orphan models. It really simplified the interface, because here we now have this single class with its single point of entry for any public API. There is nothing else you can do except for call the call method on it. And overall, we think that this has led to a significantly cleaner code base. Another thing that we're actually in the process of doing is currently is we've started relying quite a bit on custom matchers in our RSpec, because there were a few things that were kind of specific to our application domain, and instead of writing them from scratch every single time, we've created custom RSpec matchers that allowed us to test the same from multiple places. So I'll speak about the one that I'm most familiar with, and that is we've implemented a custom, actually, I guess the second part of this bullet point, we've implemented a custom form builder whose job it is to, so whenever it builds a form, for example, again, let's say for a sponsor, it asks the sponsor model which of its attributes have presence requirements on them. And based on that, it marks those form fields as required in the form. And so to avoid having to iterate over all the form fields in all of our view specs, and to make sure that they're all either marked or not marked with the required label, what we've done instead is we created a custom RSpec matcher that very simply allows you to say, expect all required attributes to be marked as required, and expect all optional attributes not to be marked as required. And this is something that, again, results in a very clean and readable RSpec file. Of course, if you want to look into the functionality some more, you're free to use the code base to browse through the code base and see how we implement it. But it allows us to write these specs much cleaner and much faster. And the final thing, this is something that has been present, I think, since the inception of the project, is this discussion about Cucumber and RSpec. So we believe in feature tests as well as in unit tests, but at least in the active admin days, it was very difficult for us, or possibly even impossible, to write a view spec. And so we ended up abusing Cucumber and writing views, or writing features that were essentially view specs that were littered with assertions about every single field that you might see in a view. And this has prompted us to start a kind of broader discussion about using Cucumber or RSpec at all, using them for features. And the discussion is basically ongoing. We have both Cucumber, we have a rather large Cucumber test suite and a very small and kind of experimental RSpec feature suite. And the discussion is in progress, basically, as to which one we're going to land on eventually. But that's the kind of thing that you can expect to get involved in if you join the OSRA team. All these discussions happen involving all members of the team. Everybody's opinion carries equal weight. And we enjoy having these discussions because generally we end up learning something new, no matter what one's position is. How are we doing, Christian?
Very well. I think that you covered everything very well.
All right, excellent. I can stop talking then and drink a little bit of water. So
let's wrap up.
All right, so if you like what you see, if you're curious about what you see, then please, this is the website of the OSRA project on Agile Ventures. You can find us there quite easily. You can see we're the third project down in the current projects list. Pretty good spot. Would be nice to move into number one, but I don't think that's entirely merit-based either. So you can find us easily. Have a look. You can find our GitHub repo. Have a look at our code. Once you get access to the Slack, to the Agile Ventures Slack team, you'll be able to look at our Slack channel and see what kind of things we talk about and how intelligent we sound. And come by and say hello.
Say hello and let us help you set up and get started.
Yeah, definitely. Don't be shy. If the code looks overwhelming, if the setup instructions are incomprehensible, don't let that stop you. We've helped multiple people set up over the months, and it's a learning experience for us as well.
Yeah, many people are learning so fast that you can't imagine. So
yep,
you can go a long way in just a few weeks.
Precisely.
Yeah. So.
All right. So thanks for watching, and we hope to see you soon.
Cool. Bye-bye.
Bye.